Dust choked the air. Radios screamed with broken voices. 578 Navy SEALs were buried alive under a collapsed mountain tunnel cut off. Oxygen running out. Command said, "No air support possible." But then, across the comms, a calm female voice broke through. "This is Viper 1. Keep your heads down. I'm bringing you light." Dust hung in the narrow Afghan valley like a curtain, sunlight struggling to break through the haze. The convoy of armored vehicles moved slowly along the jagged mountain pass, engines rumbling, boots crunching on the gravel. To the untrained eye it looked like another routine patrol, but every SEAL in that column knew better. In these mountains, routine was an illusion. The team was massive, nearly 600 Navy SEALs, stretched in formation along the rocky path. Their mission simple on paper: secure a hidden tunnel network believed to be used by insurgents for weapons smuggling. Intelligence suggested the route was unstable, prone to landslides, but the higher-ups had given a green light. In and out in a day, one officer had said confidently. No one argued. Orders were orders. The tunnel entrance yawned ahead, a jagged black mouth carved into the mountainside. As the first vehicles rolled in, an uneasy silence fell. Radios crackled softly. Boots echoed against damp stone. The deeper they moved, the cooler the air became, and the walls seemed to press closer around them. Then came the sound no soldier ever forgets, a sharp rolling thunder that doesn't belong in the sky. The ground trembled violently, dust showering down like rain. Someone shouted, "Ambush!" But the truth was worse. The mountain itself had become the enemy. A massive explosion ripped through the rock, and in an instant chaos swallowed the convoy. The tunnel collapsed with a roar that drowned every scream, every command, every prayer. Darkness, deafening, suffocating darkness. For several heartbeats no one moved. Then came the coughing, the gasping, desperate lungs clawing for air as dust filled every corner of the sealed tunnel. Flashlights flickered on, beams slicing through the choking haze. Men scrambled to check on each other, pulling the wounded from beneath slabs of stone, counting heads. Status report. The SEAL commander's voice cracked through the radio, ragged but steady. One by one, the squad leaders responded. Injuries, broken limbs, crushed gear, but the truth was undeniable. All 578 men were trapped underground. The walls groaned as if the mountain was mocking them. Every attempt to call HQ came back with static. Oxygen was finite, and every breath seemed thinner than the last. One medic muttered, "We've got hours, not days." Panic threatened to take hold. Some pounded on the rock with rifle butts, others whispered quiet prayers. A few sat in stunned silence, realizing that their mission had just turned into a mass grave. The commander forced calm into his voice. "We don't lose our heads. We don't leave men behind." We hold his word steady to them, but he knew the truth. Without outside help, their chances were zero. Above ground, the collapse was seen as a death sentence. Satellite feeds showed nothing but dust clouds where the tunnel had been. Command debated rescue options, but every simulation ended the same. Dig too hard, and the mountain buries them deeper. Drop explosives, and you risk killing them all. The order came down cold and clinical. Rescue not feasible. Contain the loss. But deep inside that tunnel, the SEALs weren't giving up, and neither was someone else. Far above the valley, in the cockpit of a steel beast, a young pilot listened to the frantic, broken signals on her comms. Her call sign was Viper 1, and unlike the others, she didn't hear a hopeless situation. She heard coordinates. She heard men alive, waiting, and she whispered to herself, gripping the throttle of her A-10 Warthog, "Not on my watch." Inside the tunnel, time had lost its meaning. Minutes felt like hours, and every breath sounded louder than gunfire. The SEALs had survived firefights, ambushes, even airstrikes, but nothing had prepared them for the slow suffocation of being entombed alive. Dust clung to their skin, turning sweat into mud. Coughs echoed in the darkness. Sharp and ragged, the medics worked with shaking hands, binding wounds under the weak glow of headlamps. A few soldiers tried to clear rubble with entrenching tools, but each strike against the stone only sent tremors through the mountain, forcing them to stop. "Sir," one of the squad leaders whispered to the commander, "we've got at least 20 with serious injuries. Broken legs, concussions. They won't last if we can't move them soon." The commander's jaw tightened. He had 578 lives depending on him, and no options. Their comms had been reduced to static-filled fragments. Every time they tried to transmit, the mountain swallowed their signal. The men began rationing oxygen instinctively. Helmets came off. Unnecessary movements stopped. Voices lowered. They all knew the math. Hundreds of men packed into a sealed chamber meant the air was vanishing by the second. Someone tried to calculate out loud, but another shut him up quickly. No one wanted to hear the numbers. Far above, the command center buzzed with panic of its own. Screens lit up with maps and satellite feeds. Officers shouting over one another. One suggested sending in engineers with drilling equipment. Another argued for controlled charges to open the tunnel. Both options were dismissed as suicide missions. A senior officer finally slammed his hand on the table. "Even if we start now, they'll run out of air before we reach them. This isn't a rescue, it's a recovery." Silence followed. For the brass it was already over. Back underground, The SEALs didn't know that yet, but they could feel it in their bones. Every soldier in that darkness understood how fragile their chances were. The youngest of them, barely out of training, muttered, "So this is it. Buried like rats." His words cracked something in the air. A ripple of dread spreading through the ranks. The commander spun on him, voice sharp. "Lock it down, son. We don't die till we're dead. You hear me? We fight till our last breath." It steadied some, but the fear never fully left. A group began carving tally marks on the tunnel wall with knives, tracking the hours. Another group prayed quietly in a circle. And yet, even in despair, the SEAL Brotherhood held. No one was left alone. Injured men were propped against shoulders, water bottles passed hand to hand. Even when sips were all that remained. Then came the sound that froze them all, a faint, rhythmic clinking. At first, they thought it was more rock shifting. But no, it was distant, mechanical, steady. Something in the rubble above. "Rescue," someone whispered. Hope flickered, but the commander's instincts didn't trust it. He pressed his ear to the stone, listening. The sound stopped, replaced by silence, then a faint rumble in the distance. Above them, enemy fighters had arrived. The collapse had drawn them like vultures. They were setting up mortar and heavy guns on the ridges above, ensuring that even if the SEALs clawed their way out, they would be gunned down before seeing daylight. It was a double coffin now trapped below, surrounded above. Back in her cockpit miles away, Viper 1 sat listening to broken transmissions. Through the static, she caught fragments. Hundreds trapped. Oxygen, hours left. Her eyes narrowed. Command had already tagged the operation as lost, but she wasn't wired for surrender. She ran her gloved hand over the controls of her A-10 Warthog, feeling the hum of its engines like a heartbeat. Most pilots avoided terrain like this. The canyons were narrow, the winds treacherous, the enemy guns perfectly placed. But where others saw a no-fly zone, she saw a challenge. Rescue not feasible. She repeated the words she'd overheard from command, almost spitting them. Then she clicked her comms on. Voice calm, steady, unshakable. "This is Viper 1. Mark their coordinates. If nobody else will fly in, I will." The room at HQ went silent. One general barked, "You'll kill them all." But her reply cut through like steel. "No sir, I'll get them out." The desert sky shimmered with heat as Viper 1 pushed the throttle forward. Her A-10 Warthog roaring low over the ridge. The beast was built for one purpose: destruction. Twin turbofans growled like thunder, and the infamous GAU-8 Avenger cannon beneath her cockpit gleamed, a weapon powerful enough to tear tanks apart. But today, its purpose would be something no manual had ever described: carving life out of stone. Her headset crackled with voices, warnings, arguments. Command was shouting over each other, forbidding her to engage. One general's voice cut in sharply. "Viper 1, disengage. The risk is unacceptable. You'll collapse the chamber and bury them deeper." But she didn't flinch. Her voice came back steady, almost calm. "Risk is all they've got left, sir. If I don't fire, they're already dead." Below, the canyon stretched like a jagged scar across the earth. Smoke rose from enemy mortar positioned along the ridges, their barrels already pointed at the sealed tunnel. Insurgents knew the SEALs were trapped and they were preparing to crush any rescue attempt. Viper's eyes narrowed. Not today. She rolled her Warthog sideways, skimming the canyon wall so close her wings nearly scraped rock. Bullets streaked upward from the ridges, trace around stitching the air. Her HUD flashed warnings: missile lock, altitude low, stall imminent. She ignored them all, heart sinking with the roar of her engines. Inside the tunnel, the SEALs heard it before they believed it. A low, thunderous growl from above, unmistakable to any soldier who had fought with air support. One whispered in disbelief, "A desp. No way they're sending one in here." The commander tilted his head, listening. His lips curled into a grim smile. They just did. The first strafing run came seconds later. Brut. The canyon walls shook as the Avenger cannon unleashed its storm, not at the SEALs but at the outer layers of rubble sealing them in. Sparks flew as rock exploded outward, chunks raining down the mountainside. Men shielded their heads inside the tunnel, coughing as dust blasted through. For the first time since the collapse, it wasn't suffocating silence they heard, it was war. And strangely, that sound gave them hope. But the mission was far from over. Every strike had to be perfect. Too shallow, and the tunnel remained sealed. Too deep, and the chamber collapsed, crushing 578 lives instantly. It was a razor's edge, and Viper was balancing on it alone. She made another pass, skimming the canyon floor so low that boulders rattled in her wake. Enemy anti-air lit up, missiles streaking past her wings. Alarms screamed inside her cockpit, but her hands never wavered. "Hang tight, boys," she muttered under her breath, lining up for another burst. "I'm drawing you a doorway." The SEALs braced as another thunderous blast tore through the rubble. This time, a sliver of light cut through the dust above them. One soldier pointed, eyes wide. "Daylight. I see daylight." The tunnel erupted with shouts, raw and desperate, echoing like a war cry. Hope had pierced the darkness, a shaft of sunlight cutting into their tomb. Above, Viper circled wide, breath ragged but focused. Her Warthog had taken hits, warning lights blinking red, fuel burning faster than planned, but she wasn't finished. Not until the job was done. Command still screamed in her ear, demanding she pull out. Viper 1, disengage. You've done enough. Her reply came sharp, unyielding. Not until they can walk out on their own. She banked hard, lining up for what might be her final run. Her pulse slowed. Her vision narrowed. Her hands gripped the stick like steel. The canyon floor rushed up to meet her as she whispered into her mic. A promise meant for the men trapped below. One more pass. Hold the line. I'm bringing you home. The canyon had become a battlefield of thunder and fire. Viper 1's Warthog sliced through the sky again, its engines howling as flak and tracer rounds clawed at her wings. Each time she passed over the rubble, the mountain shuddered under the fury of her cannon. But precision was everything. This wasn't about destruction, it was surgery. Inside the tunnel, SEALs pressed themselves against the walls, shielding the injured as cascades of stone rained down from above. The dust grew so thick it burned their lungs. Then, suddenly, a gasp. Light. A jagged blade of sunlight cut through the darkness. Faint, but real. Men scrambled to see it, to touch it. Rough hands reached up toward the faint glow breaking into their tomb. For the first time in hours. Hope wasn't just an idea, it was something they could see. But the opening was too small, choked with jagged debris. It wasn't an exit yet, just a promise. The commander knew what that meant. He raised his voice above the coughing, above the chaos. Hold steady. Don't rush it. She's carving us a way out. Give her time. Above ground, enemy fire intensified. Mortar erupted along the ridges, forcing Viper to jink and roll as explosions peppered the canyon walls. Alarms screamed in her cockpit, red lights flashing warnings of engine strain. Hydraulic pressure dipping, she clenched her jaw. Come on, girl, she whispered to the Warthog. Hold together a little longer. Her HUD blinked, fuel critical. She ignored it. Command broke through her. Comes again. Voices strained, panicked. Viper 1, you've done enough. Abort. That airframe won't take another run. Her voice came back low, firm, final. Not leaving them half buried. They walk out or I don't leave. She dropped into the canyon again, lining up for the narrowest strike yet. Enemy gunners tracked her every move. A missile streaked past her right wing, close enough to rattle the frame. Another burst of flak pounded her fuselage. The Warthog shook violently, warning alarms shrieking. Still her finger tightened on the trigger. Brut. The Avenger roared, spitting fire and lead with merciless precision. The cannon's thunder echoed off the canyon walls, each round tearing into stone. The ground trembled, dust exploding outward like a sandstorm, and then silence. For a moment, no one moved. The SEALs blinked through the dust, ears ringing. Then one soldier shouted, voice raw with disbelief. It's open. She's blown it open. The tunnel erupted in shears. Where once there had been solid rock, now there was a jagged opening wide enough for men to crawl through. Light poured in, harsh and golden, cutting across the dust like a beacon. The commander didn't waste a second. Move. Get the wounded up first. This is our door. Hands worked feverishly, dragging injured men toward the shaft of daylight. Others cleared loose stone, widening the gap with bare hands. Every SEAL was on the move now, adrenaline burning away, despair above. Viper pulled hard on the stick, her Warthog straining as it clawed for altitude. Her cockpit smelled of smoke, her gauges blinking red. She stole a glance back, eyes narrowing at the sight of movement below. Dark figures pouring from the mountain like ants, sunlight catching on their helmets. 578 lives. Clawing their way into daylight, her lips curled into the faintest smile. That's it, boys. Follow the light. But the fight wasn't over. Enemy guns shifted their aim. Mortar If the SEALs were crawling out, they'd be walking straight into a kill zone, and Viper 1 wasn't about to let that happen. She shoved the throttle forward, the Warthog screaming back into the fray. Smoke trailed from her battered frame, but her voice over comms was steady, fierce. They've got their exit. Now I'll keep it clear. The mountain had given them a doorway, but stepping into daylight only revealed a deadlier threat as the first SEALs crawled free. Dragging their wounded, the ridgelines above came alive with fire. Mortar thumped, machine guns rattled, tracers streaked down toward the narrow gap like burning rain. Cover, get to cover, the commander barked, shoving men toward boulders and craters. But with hundreds still inside the tunnel, bottlenecked at the exit, they were exposed perfect targets for the enemy. That was when the sky screamed. Viper 1's Warthog dropped from the heavens like a predator, wings low, cannon primed. The insurgents barely had time to glance up before the Avenger roared again. BRRRRT. The ridgeline erupted in fire and stone. Enemy gun nests shredded in a storm of tungsten rounds. The SEALs below cheered, voices hoarse but alive. They had air cover, their angel in the sky. But Viper wasn't untouchable. A plume of smoke streaked upward, a shoulder-fired missile, twisting toward her like a viper of its own. She rolled hard, alarms shrieking as the missile clipped her left wingtip, exploding in a flash of fire. Her cockpit rattled, warning screamed, hydraulic pressure low, engine damage, fuel critical. She gritted her teeth. Not yet. Not while they're still on the ground. Below, the commander's voice roared over the comms. Move. Everyone out. She's buying us time. Don't waste it. Seal after seal poured from the tunnel, hauling comrades stumbling into the open air. Viper circled again, ignoring the growing fire in her control systems. Her hands shook, sweat dripping under her helmet, but her eyes burned with focus. Another mortar position lit up on the far ridge, preparing to fire on the bottleneck below. She dove BRRRRT. The position vanished in a shower of sparks and dirt. But now both ridges were alive with tracers cut the sky, forcing her lower, until her Warthog skimmed the canyon like a stone skipping water. She felt every bullet thump into the fuselage, every hit shaking her bones. Inside the tunnel, only a few dozen SEALs remained, the last ones dragging their injured brothers toward daylight. The commander stayed until the end, refusing to leave while even one man was still trapped. Overhead, Viper's plane shuddered violently. Smoke poured from her right engine, warning klaxons screaming in her ears. Her HUD flashed one brutal word: failure. She didn't care. She pushed the throttle forward for one final pass, her voice cutting through the comms steady despite the chaos. Last run, clear that exit. Now the commander barked to his men. Move, damn it, move. The last SEALs surged out, stumbling into the sunlight as her cannon thundered once more. The mountains shook with her fury. Enemy lines obliterated in a storm of lead, and then silence. The Warthog, crippled and smoking, climbed just enough to clear the ridge. Her comms crackled faintly. They're all yours, Commander. Every last one. Below, the SEALs gathered, 578 strong, battered and bloodied but alive. They watched in stunned silence as the lone A-10 limped across the sky, trailing fire. One SEAL whispered, voice raw with awe, "She didn't just give us an exit. She gave us a fighting chance." The commander's eyes followed the burning Warthog, his chest tight with something more than relief. He raised a salute, dust and smoke stinging his face. Viper 1, you just carved your name into history. The men echoed his salute, hundreds of hands rising in unison. For a brief, defiant moment, the battlefield fell quiet as if the mountain itself bowed to her courage. But the story wasn't over yet, because as long as she was still in the air, the question remained, would she make it back? The battlefield was still smoldering when the last SEAL stumbled free of the tunnel. Dust coated their faces, blood streaked their uniforms, but their eyes carried something brighter than exhaustion: life. Against every odd, all 578 had survived. They looked skyward, searching for the angel who had carved their freedom. The A-10 was limping across the horizon, smoke trailing from one wing, its frame battered and scarred. It looked less like a war machine and more like a wounded bird refusing to fall. The commander raised his radio, static buzzing in his ear. Viper 1, this is Eagle Leader. Do you copy? A pause. Then her voice, ragged, weak, but steady as ever. Copy. Eagle status on your men. He swallowed hard, glancing at the sea of battered soldiers standing under the open sky. All accounted for. 0 left behind. Because of you. There was silence on the line. Then her voice, softer now. Then it was worth it. The SEALs watched as the Warthog dipped slightly, struggling against gravity. One soldier whispered, "She's not going to make it back." Another clenched his fists, shaking his head. "She has to. After this, she has to." Command scrambled rescue choppers, diverting them from their original orders. Every pilot in the sky now knew the story. One A-10 had done the impossible. Radios across the region buzzed with the same word, Viper. Minutes later, the crippled Warthog appeared over a forward operating base. Emergency crews rushed to the runway, fire engines waiting. The landing was brutal, metal screeching, sparks showering as one landing gear collapsed. The A-10 skidded, ground tearing beneath it, until it finally shuddered to a halt in a cloud of smoke. The canopy popped open. Out climbed a figure small against the hulking machine, helmet tucked under her arm, face streaked with sweat and soot. She staggered slightly, but her spine was straight. Viper 1 had lived. When the news reached the SEALs still regrouping in the valley, the commander let out a breath he didn't realize he was holding. "She made it," he said quietly, as though reassuring himself. The men around him erupted in cheers, their voices echoing off the mountainsides. Later, when they were flown back to base, the SEALs formed an unbroken line on the tarmac. As she stepped off the smoking Warthog, hundreds of battle-worn men stood at attention, boots snapping together. The commander stepped forward, saluting her. His voice carried across the silence. "You weren't our air support. You were our lifeline." Her reply was simple, almost too simple. "Just doing my job." But the men knew better. Stories would spread of how 578 Navy SEALs were buried alive in a mountain, and how one woman in an A-10 refused to accept their deaths. Back in the States, headlines would call her reckless. Analysts would argue whether her actions had violated protocol. Some generals would insist it was luck. But among the soldiers, the truth was carved in stone. She had turned a tomb into a doorway, defying both command and death itself. Weeks later, one of the SEALs left a note on her desk at the airbase. It wasn't long, just a scrap of paper with 3 words scrawled in dust-stained ink. "You saved us." She kept it tucked inside her flight log, a reminder of the day when rules said no, but courage said go. And from that day forward, whenever the roar of an A-10 shook the skies, men on the ground whispered the same name with reverence and pride: Viper 1. If Viper 1's courage inspired you, don't forget to like this video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more true hero stories.